Hello, my name is Bill McDonald of the Charlotte County Library and History, and this is Ode to Local Authors, and our guest is Tammie Diehl. Tammie, welcome to our Ode to Local Writers.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And if you can tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in writing.
Well, I taught writing on the high school and college level, and of course that was great literature. So when I started to write, I wanted to write something light and fluffy and fun, like a beach read, and that you didn't have to sit down and nobody was going to take in a class and analyze. And I really didn't think anybody'd ever see it, but a few of my friends see it, and then people started liking the one that I wrote about Florida, about you know those guys that used to be on the Sonic commercial, the two funny guys.
Oh, right, yeah, they're still doing commercials,
I pictured them as my characters, and so I started writing, and it had nothing to do with those actors, but just the characters. I thought this is what they would do or say, so I wrote that. And then I started writing about different things because I grew up around St. Petersburg and Tampa, and I remembered some of the old Florida things, and I put that in there. And then the second book that I wrote was totally different, this one, and it was about a girl from Tennessee who had gone to the Middle East to teach in a private school, and she got kidnapped and the school got bombed, and of course everybody tried to blame the terrorist. Well, it turned out it wasn't. It was just a group of bums that you could have in any country that did it. So she ended up, of course it's a romance, so she ended up marrying this millionaire, and he ended up moving to the United States, and they do all this charity work. But then I thought that was the end of it, and then people said, well, what happens next? So I wrote the sequel to it, Visions and Vows, about how they got married and they did all this work. And one thing is that, I don't even know if this is possible, this is poetic license, but they took the old oil drills, and they took them down to Africa and places where they needed clean water, and they drilled down wells and got fresh water and did stuff like that. And so, and since it's not a bestseller, no one said, oh, that's impossible to do, because I don't know. And then after that, I decided I wanted to write some mysteries. So I wrote, I don't pick this one up, I wrote The Artful Dodger and the Cupcake Cop. And I love the characters. They're my favorite characters of all time. So then I decided, and you can see that I changed the size on them. Then I wrote this sequel to it called the Cockspur Lighthouse Secret, and that's actually one of the oldest lighthouses on the East Coast. It's off the coast of Savannah, and so it played a major part in the story. And there's some art history background in them too, because I did the research on, and doing that one I had to look up the history of hurricanes that came in on the East Coast and things like that. So it's like I'd get sidetracked, like when you were a kid and you'd read the encyclopedia before everything was online, and you'd be going to look up something and you'd read 6 or 7 stories before you got to the article. That's the way I did there. And then I decided that I had to write a sequel with them, and so I wrote this Meltdown. And the interesting thing about that was, I want to show you the cover. Of course, that's a famous painting. Well, not melted down, but it's from the Scream. Well, I found out online that I saw this picture, and in it it's about stealing art from the gallery and so forth. So it was a perfect picture. So I was trying to find out how I could use it on my cover. And as it turned out, the guy's an artist in Italy, and he said, you're welcome to use it, just be sure that you put in there about my website and how they can get in touch with me if they want to know any more about my artwork. So that worked out really, really well, because I think it helped him too. But I enjoyed that, and I'm trying to write a sequel to it, but I'm ending up doing little little short pieces, so I don't know what's going to happen next. And then the other thing, as I said, we started a writing group at Inglewood Library, and we meet the second and fourth Saturdays a month, and we put out a literary magazine, and this was the copy of the second one. I don't have a copy of the first one, but the second one we did, and it was different people, all the people that wanted to could contribute to it, and they liked doing it, so we put out another one last year. And we didn't last year, because last year was the missing year.
Right, COVID.
But we're going to do one, I think, this spring. People say they want to do it, but at one point, two of the other people in the group and I all wrote something too long to go in here, but something too short to go in independently. So we put them together, and we called it a fiction sampler. And actually, we've made some money on it. When I say some money, that's true, because last week I made $3. But sure. Every time I make 3, there's 9 being made. But that was a lot of fun, because one of the guys writes horror stories, one writes romance, and I wrote mystery. So it was sort of interesting to showcase the different writers, and there's a lot of talent in this area, really a lot.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned Old Florida as kind of an important setting. What does Old Florida mean to you?
Do you remember when in Inglewood when they had the fishery?
Maybe, I'm not sure.
Well, Old Florida was before air conditioning, and the sidewalks were all covered with a tin roof that went over it, and the stores had big fans in them, and sometimes when they started having air conditioning, they'd always put air cooled, come in. But Old Florida to me was the people that were living here before Disney.
Oh, okay.
When Florida was Florida, and when everybody talked like I do instead of like they're from Brooklyn or somewhere. So there's a big difference, I think. And my family, some of my family's been in Florida for years, and they're somehow tied up with Winn-Dixie. I know it was Winn Lovett at one time and then Winn-Dixie, but I have none of the money, so hey.
Sure. Now, you mentioned that you've taught writing in high school and college. Were there any specific writers that influenced you?
To teach it, I like Carson McCullers and Flannery O'Connor, and even Faulkner and Tennessee Williams, because I wrote the curriculum for the county for the Southern Lit, and then I decided to write a book that they would use as a textbook, and it was called The Quirkiness of Southern Lit, but I don't have a copy of it. But they influenced me a lot, because they're just so kooky. I mean, really kooky. So that, and then I think I would say those 3 did. And then of course all the mystery writers that I read growing up.
And so the books that you're writing now, are there any specific writers that influence you more as a writer rather than a writing teacher?
When I started to write about my characters that are in the Joseph Tots and Violet Jones series, I think Janet Ivanovich must have influenced me, because I didn't realize it, but they had sort of the same interplay that her characters did in her early books, but I wasn't aware of it until later. But I would say something like that, that's light, and that there's almost a love-hate relationship.
The Stephanie Plum books.
That type.
Now, as far as the writing process, is there a set time that you write every day, or you just write when the inspiration?
Writers say that they're either pantsters or planners, and the planners say, okay, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write from 10 till 11 every single day. And the pantsters fly by the seat of their pants. And many times I've jumped up in the middle of the night and thought of something and had to turn on the light and write it down, because I learned real quickly that I would not remember it the next day, even though I thought I would. So I take notes and I write it, but it's just, and it'll just pour out for a day or two, and then I'm done with it a while.
And do you have anything you'd like to, any excerpts from your books that you'd like to read for us? Or?
Well, first off, this was the one that's the Florida book, and it's called The Thursday Afternoon Dance Social at Fat Willie's Fish Camp, and a dozen other Florida stories. The interesting thing about it is this: there really is a Fat Willie's Fish Camp. I think now it's just Fat Willie's Restaurant. It's up in Brandon, but then back in the old days it was a fish camp. And this actually was Santa Maria Island Pier. And this book came out in, when did it come out? 2017. In, I believe, November, and I was so glad I had this on the cover, because Irma went through and took this down.
Wow, yeah.
So I felt like it was very appropriate that I had captured something, you know, there. But in it, these are the two characters that are, to me, these are the comedy characters. And if each one of these is totally different, I mean, you would not know that they're written by the same author. But this one is called, and this was inspired by a real headline in the Charlotte Sun. Friend whacked with soap dispenser, bathroom brawl over peanuts. Jesse Crawford and his brother Gaylord Humphrey, both from East Mosley, found themselves in adjoining cells in the county jail early Sunday morning. At 2 a.m., they were still jawing at each other. La-di-da, Jesse taunted, making monkey faces at his cell neighbor. Shut up your face, I'm not in the mood to listen to you anyhow. How come you saying that, Gaylord? 'Cause you're in jail, Jesse said. Well, dickhead, where are you? At a health spa? Gaylord shot back. The dialogue ping-ponged back and forth until the deputy, wearing his dark green uniform strained against his bulging muscles, came over and banged on the bars with a billy club. Knock it off, you two. As he walked off, he looked back with a menacing glare. I mean it. Once he got a bee in his britches about, Gaylord remarked. Beats me, said Jesse. You know what I hate about being in jail? I just hate it when they take my cap. Jesse was almost never seen without his jagged Jughead-style hat. They didn't mind being in jail, but neither one wanted to have to go before the judge Monday. I hope we don't get that old hangdog-looking Judge Francis. Nah, he never liked me anyway, Jesse said. They were silent a while as they stretched out on the hard bunks in the cells, thinking, you know, Jesse, he looks just like Lyndon Johnson. Don't you think old LBJ, if he was alive, do you think he'd be a judge today? Jesse considered the question as if it were a topic at a philosophical society before he said, nah, I think you got him mixed up with the Kennedy brothers. He's more likely to be, they're more likely to be spotted somewhere like Elvis. The two contemplated this for a long time. Monday morning, the two, sometimes best friends, appeared before Judge Francis, both with court-appointed counsel. Both with slick back hair and both with ill-fitting suits they kept just for weddings, funerals, and court appearances. After the hear ye, the bailiff called Jesse Crawford, Gaylord Humphrey on charges of fighting and destruction of private property. I plead you. Both public defender counselors said guilty, but with extenuating circumstances, Your Honor. The judge opened his mouth to hand out two days in jail and restitution of private property, but extenuating circumstances got the better of his curiosity. What extenuating circumstances, he asked. Jesse's public defender asked. Hunger, at the same time that Gaylord said peanut allergies. The judge looked at the clock and asked for details. Gaylord started explaining, well, me and Jesse were at the Lizard Lick bar Saturday night watching the Final Four on the big screen, and we'd had a few beers. How many? Asked Judge Francis. Maybe a dozen. Do you think, Jesse? Judge Francis responded. So about 6 apiece? No, a dozen each, but maybe only 11, because I can't rightly remember. But we naturally were running to the little boys' room all night, and Clarice wouldn't give us any more boiled eggs or any pickles. Clarice, who's he? How did he get into this? The judge asked. Well, he's the bartender. You ought to remember him from the last time we were here, Gaylord offered. Judge Francis just wiggled his finger and continued to motion, beginning for them to continue. Jesse broke in. Well, anyways, as we was saying about the restroom, I came back and there wasn't a grain of salt, much less any peanuts left. I called Gaylord on it. You ate all the peanuts. I was starving. And he told me that Clarence told him, excuse me, I told him I was starving, and he said, nope, I told Clarence that you were allergic to peanuts. That's how we got some boiled eggs and pickles earlier, don't you see? Gaylord's public offender jumped up. Your Honor, that proves that my client is allergic to peanuts, and he couldn't have eaten the peanuts as accused. Damn hell you say he couldn't, Jesse said. I've seen him gulp down a half a bushel on a good night. The judge gavelled them and said, how did this private property get damaged? Oh, that was just an accident. You see, we got to arguing over who ate the last peanuts, and I had to go relieve myself. Jesse followed me, running his mouth as usual. When I was washing my hands, he called me a peanut stealer. I was shocked that my best friend would call me that. And when I whirled around to look him in the eyes, I guess my turning so quickly gave him torque to my hold on the soap thing. I don't know how it happened, do we, Jesse? But the next thing I know, Jesse's head came in contact with a soap thing in my jig, and he landed on the floor. Some nosy Rosie called the cops. Judge Francis sighed. Well, go on, continue. Jesse reiterated events and stood there and said that he couldn't know what exactly happened because he didn't know what couldn't really do it. I don't know what a ribonate, what are you saying? But I'll be glad to tell you what happened. Jesse claimed that it was all science. It was a natural law of science that he said caused the whole thing. I'm afraid to ask, but I have to hear it, the judge said. Well, the force of the soap thing coming off the wall and being that gravity exists, it hit the floor, and the gravity pulled it down. The torque thing pulled the soap dispenser off the wall. Jesse'd gotten a dizzy spell from hunger and passed out. And Gaylord being a good friend and all, I had to pick up his fall, and somehow Jesse's head just came into contact with the soap dispenser. Judge Francis was tired of this foolishness, but duly impressed with the creative tale these two jailbirds had cooked up just over the weekend. He had a court clerk check out the cost to replace the soap dispenser, including labor, and in this instant informative society, the clerk quickly checked that it would be $24 plus labor. Judge Francis found them guilty, fined them for the cost of replacing the property and that they damaged in one night in jail, which they could apply their served time applied to, and he suggested that they not frequent any bars at the same time in this county in the future, and to do their drinking out of his jurisdiction henceforth. He knew well that anyone, and his last two words would be foreign to those two, but it felt good just to say it. The co-defendants pumped the air and allowed the public defenders to usher them out of the courtroom before they got into more trouble. After they parted from the lawyers at the bottom of the steps, Jesse said to Gaylord, "Who pays for those lawyers?" Gaylord had no idea, but he said, "You know what, I bet they don't work for peanuts." The word peanuts was too much for these two jailbirds. They slapped each other on the back and laughed all the way to the bus stop. Even on the ride back to East Mosley, they would break out giggling over one or the other saying peanuts. But Gaylord had a sobering thought as they were going to come up with $24 and probably $30 labor. I don't know how we're going to do it. Jesse considered a while and he said, well, if you can come up with $20, I'll throw in $5 and I'll put the things up on the wall myself. They high-fived it as Gaylord said, "That's a plan." When Jesse stood up and said, "Yeah, and I'll work for peanuts," they laughed so hard they missed their bus stop.
And once again, the title of that, Tammie?
That's the Thursday afternoon dance social at Fat Willie's Fish Camp. And the main story in here is not at all about these two. It's about the people that go to Fat Willie's Fish Camp, and it tells about the people going there and what all they do. And it's And then there's one, the title, I'll just tell you so you get a sort of an idea of what's in here. Not So Ready for Mensa Yet, and that continues with those two. When they found out the judge was a member of Mensa, and they decided they would join it. They thought it was some club you could join, and they're filling out the forms.
Sure.
And it's funnier than the first part, but can't read it all. And then there's highlights in Stella's hair salon when a car drove through it, and that actually happened when I lived in Fort Myers, that a car went through the styling salon. Cross-dressers and the Cookie Monster. I got that idea when I read, and this is the truth, that somebody that was a cross-dresser tried to run for governor or something in Florida one time. And then there was a hair-raising photo shoot at the mall when the bunny attacked a lady. Facts of Life, I forgot what that one's about. Tumbling gyros and regaining your chakras. That one's funny because these people meet some people and the way they're dressed and the way they act, and they say, "Where are you from?" and they say, oh, and they wanted to eat supper at 4 o'clock and get in bed by 7:30, and they said, "Where are you from?" and the guy said, "Sarasota," and they end up saying, "Yeah, what did I ask?" Florida. Yeah. And then cultural clash at Barbara B. Mann. That's when the characters of the book from Oman come over, and they go and they see a bunch of what they called hoochie mamas. And then there's the Thursday afternoon dance social, and there's the gator love. This lady wants to wrestle an alligator. And the food fights. That one's called Don't Serve Me No Cold Fries. The xylophone musician Greased, and that was in the newspaper. And so that was how that one happened.
Well, great. That sounds very earthy and very, very Southern in style and certainly in humor. I want to thank you for being our guest on Ode to Local Writers, Tammie Diehl.
Thank you.
And thank you very much for spending our time with us.
And tell anybody that's interested in writing to come over to Englewood Library on the second and fourth Saturday of the month at 10:45.
And that's at Englewood Charlotte Library. Thank you.